Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the Community Challenge Grant hosted by Connecticut Main Street Center. My name is Michelle McCabe, and I'm the Executive Director of Connecticut Main Street. Before we begin, just a few words. Connecticut Main Street Center is the expert resource for developing and sustaining vibrant downtowns and main streets that fuel our state's prosperity. Our mission is to assess, to educate, to convene, and to advocate in order to develop and grow great downtowns. We are grateful to our sponsors and funding partners. Connecticut Main Street Center's founding partners are Eversource and the State of Connecticut's Department of Economic and Community Development. And our growth sponsors are Avangrid and the Connecticut State Historic Preservation Office. Our educational programs are sponsored by Webster Bank and Avangrid, with special thanks to our corporate investors, Penn Globe and Capital for Change. A note, I'm sorry, the slide is a little misleading, but actually today, our municipal officials, this webinar is approved for certified Connecticut municipal official credit with the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. Some quick housekeeping notes. This webinar will be about an hour. We will stop for questions at the end. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat function as we go along. And you will receive an evaluation survey shortly after this webinar. Please take a moment to complete the survey because it helps us to develop meaningful educational programs for you. Connecticut Main Street Center, we believe that vibrant, sustainable main streets are developed around these 6 components: a unique sense of place, economic vitality, community engagement and policies that support appropriate growth, equitable places and inclusivity, sustainable practices and protection of natural resources, and connectivity with a focus on multimodal transit. We are thrilled to bring today's webinar on the Community Challenge Grant, a program of Connecticut's Department of Economic and Community Development. This grant is an excellent opportunity to fund projects on Main Street that will contribute to that very vibrancy. And with that, I'm very excited to introduce our speakers from DECD. Our special friend, Kimberley Parsons-Whitaker, who has spent so much wonderful time with our organization at Connecticut Main Street Center and is now with DECD as a community development specialist, and Allison Pincus, Senior Economic Development Advisor with DECD. So I will let them take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be back at Connecticut Main Street Center. Let me just share my screen for you so that we can get started here. Good. Please tell me that's coming up. You can all see that. Awesome. Great. So yes, thank you. Welcome to everybody. We at DECD are thrilled to have an opportunity to talk about the Communities Challenge Grant Program with the Connecticut Main Street Center audience. Once again, I'm Kimberley Parsons-Whitaker. My role at DECD is Community Development Specialist. And I'm joined by my colleague, Allison Pincus, who's Senior Economic Development Advisor at DECD. So in this program, we are going to provide an overview of the Connecticut Communities Challenge Grant Program, the funding program. We are round 3 of this program. So we're going to discuss the application process, provide some tips to help you prepare a competitive application. And then, as Michelle said, we're going to address questions at the end of the presentation. So do feel free to type questions in the chat box. And so with that, I would like to introduce my colleague, Allison. Why don't you take it away from here, Allison?
Thanks, Kim, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us today. Again, I'm Allison Pincus, and I am a Senior Economic Development Advisor with DECD. I work on policy advising and also was involved in round 2 of Connecticut Communities Challenge, helping manage the program and reviewing applications, and will be doing the same with Kim in round 3. So very happy to have the opportunity today to talk with all of you about our program. Just to give you a sense of what we'll cover today, we'll go over the overview of the program with you, kind of what we're looking for in this program in particular. We will discuss the timeline and process to apply. Kim will talk about some previous community challenge recipients because this is our third round. And so we can provide some models from past rounds that have been successful from round 1 and 2. And we will save some time toward the end for questions and answers. So first, the purpose of this program. The goal of the Connecticut Communities Challenge program is to improve the livability, vibrancy, convenience, and equity of communities throughout Connecticut. And the program is intended to potentially create 3,000 new jobs. So we're talking here about Connecticut's downtown kind of dense areas in particular. It doesn't necessarily have to be an urban area. It could be areas in other places in Connecticut that have some kind of that are more dense for those areas. But we're really trying to take areas where there's infrastructure and things going on in places within Connecticut and make them even more vibrant, more walkable, and increase the ability for people to interact with one another in those areas in the state. Some information about the funding distribution in this program. DECD has up to $20 million available to distribute this round in round 3. And it's a competitive grant program, and grants of between $1 million and $10 million are eligible to be given out this round. So we want to stress, there are several things that now we've seen in administering the program from several rounds in the past. Some pitfalls from past rounds are when applicants have great projects, but they are applying for less than $1 million or more than $10 million from the state. Those applications are automatically deemed ineligible. So when you're putting together an application, this is one of those things, make sure that your proposal requests between $1 million and $10 million from DECD. And there's also a special emphasis on targeting distressed municipalities. So 50% of the funds here will be, we are aiming to award funds to distressed municipalities. If you're wondering what is a distressed municipality, there are 25 municipalities within the state that are deemed to be most in need of state assistance. And if you look at the notice of funding availability on the Connecticut Communities Challenge website, which I believe is linked later in this presentation, but you can also find it on our website, you can see the updated list of 25 municipalities because it changes every year. So that information is available, but also look at our frequently asked questions, because if a municipality has been on that list the few years prior, it's still eligible as a distressed municipality in round 3. So we have more information available about that. Some other things to keep in mind when putting together your application. DECD is looking for applications that align with the state's economic action plan. We will also have these slides available after the presentation. Actually, I think they're already on the Connecticut Communities Challenge website, so you can link here to see the economic action plan through our slides. And it would make, we urge you to take a look at that plan and see kind of what we're looking for there to align your application with the economic action plan. And we also are looking for applications that follow DECD's best practices. And we're trying to have taxpayer dollars. We're trying to get the biggest bang for our buck. And so we want to fund applications that are going to be a good use of taxpayer funds. And also in our NOFA, the Notice of Funding Availability, we have information about what DECD's best practices entail. So it makes sense to kind of look through those and tailor your application accordingly. And if there are parts of your application that match that, just emphasize it for those reviewing the grant to see that you're a good match. Now we'll talk a little bit about who is an eligible applicant for Connecticut Communities Challenge. We have 3 categories of eligible applicants. Municipalities are eligible applicants, as well as economic development agencies and regional councils of government. But we also encourage applications, we encourage partnerships from private and nonprofit partners to come together with municipalities, economic development agencies, and our regional councils of government. And some of the strongest applications that we've seen in the past, most of the strongest applications have been partnerships among these different groups. And it's also worth noting that eligible applicants can submit more than one application for different projects. So if there's a particular municipality that has several nonprofits coming to, or for-profit partners proposing different projects, that municipality can submit more than one application. It doesn't mean that more than one will necessarily be chosen, but an applicant that's eligible does not need to choose what it thinks is the best application. It can submit more than one if there's more than one application that makes sense and fits the purposes of our program. So in learning what is a project that fits the purposes of our program, again, eligible projects will improve the vibrancy, livability, convenience, and equity of communities and main streets across Connecticut, helping to further the goal of creating 3,000 new jobs. And now we'll get into more specifics about exactly what that means. We have several project categories that we think make a good match for this program. So I'll run through those now. We are looking for transit-oriented development that densifies commercial or residential land uses that are close to transit hubs. A lot of these, I think, will echo, the beginning of this presentation, what Connecticut Main Street, the same kind of goals about what makes a vibrant center. That's what we're looking for here. We're also looking for downtown and major hub development that improves or reuses existing property. Brownfield remediation can be a component of this kind of project. We're looking for proposals for essential infrastructure that will facilitate future development, new housing that will support affordability and local workforce, definitely something that we're looking to use these funds for here. Also, mobility improvements that increase connectivity to transit, including bicycle improvements and pedestrian improvements, and public space improvements that provide amenities to the community, including open spaces and public art projects. And it's also worth noting some applications might have more than one of these project categories. It can be hard to include multiple, so if you just have one, that's okay too, but some of our past successful projects have kind of interwoven several of these categories, which is especially exciting to us and really what we're looking for. It's not always achievable, but when it is, that's great. And Kim, in a little while, will talk about some of those specific projects, and more of them are available on our website. And you can see the ways these different categories come together to create successful projects.
Allison, if I can jump in just for a second here.
Sure.
A little source perhaps of inspiration if this is the first time that you're looking to apply for Communities Challenge. We do have on our website under news and announcements, I think it is, but it's obvious where it is. We have examples of projects that have been funded in rounds 1 and 2. And I would suggest it would be a good use of 5 minutes, 10 minutes or so, just to look at that, because it's just big picture descriptions of what they're doing. So to Allison's point about projects that are the most competitive, very often have more than one of these categories combined.
Thanks, Kim. When thinking about putting together your proposal, how will you use the funds that you receive from DECD should you be successful in being awarded a grant here? Almost all of the funds should be used for construction and renovation related hard costs, but a limited portion of funds can be used for soft costs. So that means design and engineering related costs, land acquisition, project management, administrative costs, and DECD's legal expenses. But the rule of thumb is no more than 5% of funds should be used for those kinds of costs. And please note that programming is not an eligible use of funds. We're going to go over for a moment the match requirement that's part of this grant. This one seems in past rounds to have sometimes caused confusion or just a lot of questions in what exactly qualifies as part of the match. So I'll run through it here. Hopefully it will be clear. Feel free to ask questions, and also take a look at our frequently asked questions section on our website about match, because it's fairly extensive now that we've administered 2 prior rounds and have questions from the past. So a lot of resources hopefully available for you on this one, but if not, you can always feel free to reach out to us as well. So the minimum match requirement for distressed municipalities is 25% match, And for other municipalities, we require a 50% match. A couple of things about the match, the match that is being contributed. In-kind contributions do not count toward the match requirement other than land, and contributed soft costs generally will be accepted for the match requirement, but not in-kind staff time. Debt cannot count toward the match requirement, but local and federal dollars or private dollars can count toward the match requirement. So again, if you look at our frequently asked questions, there's a whole section on match, a lot of things that have come up in the past that have caused confusion. We try to address them there, but you can always reach out to us if there are other specifics that you don't see addressed.
Yes, and please know that if you have an ARPA allocation, municipal ARPA allocation, that does count towards your match. That's very important.
So that's kind of the, getting into the weeds a little bit on what we're looking for in our application. But if you want more details, definitely carefully read our notice of funding availability. And there's more information on our website. You can review these slides after the presentation. That's kind of the substance of the program itself that we just went over. And now we will now we'll go to the review process and timeline for the application. And then Kim will also discuss successful applications from prior rounds and provide more information about the application itself. So the review process, eligible applicants submit applications through a unique SharePoint link, and we have more information about that coming. The DECD team will review and score applications, and then our commissioner, the DECD commissioner, Alexandra Dom, chooses awardees. The timeline for the application, the no-fund application period opened on March 1st, but the application is still open for now until it's open until May 3rd, but the deadline to request a link to submit your application that Kim will talk about in more detail, that deadline is April 28th. So about another month to get your application together. And then the awards will be announced. We're aiming for July 2023.
Great. Thanks, Allison.
Sure.
So this slide here, how to apply. Allison has talked about the SharePoint link. I'm going to go into that in just a second. The link to the Connecticut Communities Challenge webpage on the DECD website, I think that's being provided to all of you in the chat box. If it's not already there, it'll be there very shortly. I think that many of you are very experienced at applying for state grants in the past. Some of you are not. So I think whether you are or you're not, taking the time to read through that web page, it's one page, and there are links to the application, to the sources and uses budget sheet, to all the information that you need. I think going through all of that, just taking the time to do that, if you're working with partners on this, whether it's private or public sector partners, reading through all of that before you begin to jump into the application is critically important. Make sure that you read the notice of funding availability, the NOFA document in its entirety. I will say also off the top of my head, I think it's pages 6 and 7 of the NOFA show exactly what's being scored, what components of the application are being scored. So that's helpful to look at. Download the round 3 application, the sources and uses budget sheet, all the other material that you'll need that is talked about in the NOFA. In order to get the SharePoint link, that's basically a Dropbox for all of the files that you'll need, you'll email CT Communities Challenge at ct.gov. Again, that's on our website as well. By April 28th, in order to request that link. You can request that link at any time if you're planning on applying. I've already provided it to several potential applicants. And then you'll submit your completed application and all the required attachments by May 3rd. A couple of tips here. Prepare your responses to the application in advance. There are character limits on the application. Those limits are provided in parentheses at the end of each question so that you can see. But prepare the responses and then edit to address the questions very succinctly. It may seem obvious, but with each round, we see applications that come in and people have been typing away and they've just been going on creating War and Peace in the application, and we only get the character limits that are there, so it cuts off. So just make sure you think through that. Definitely don't wait till the last 24 hours on this. Review the FAQ document. That addresses many questions that you may have right now, many questions that you might have in the future. Definitely feel free to email with any questions that are not already addressed on the FAQ document, because we will get back in touch with you and we will update the FAQ document as questions come in. So for instance, the questions that come in today to the chat box, after this webinar is over and I've been provided with those questions, we will update the FAQ document and repost that on our website. So required attachments. So in addition to the application form itself and the budget template, the sources and uses document, which is in Excel format, for municipalities, you will need to submit the municipal certification of eligibility for discretionary state funding. That's a mouthful. It basically is a document that says, yes, we have updated our plan of conservation and development, or no, we have not yet updated it, and this is the reason why. Basically, OPM is requiring that POCDs are updated for state funding. The SHPO project notification form. So the State Historic Preservation Office, for virtually any development project, including if it is an infill lot, an empty lot, you need to submit a SHPO project notification form as part of this application. That's for historic preservation, but it's also SEPA, the Connecticut Environmental Policy Act. So you'll read in the NOFA and in the application itself what to do with that project notification form. And then I'll underscore the sources and uses budget template. Again, it's in an Excel format. It automatically tabulates in certain areas. So in addition to submitting that, we'll want to see, and this is in the application, your detailed project budget as well. Some helpful hints here. We want to make sure that Connecticut Communities Challenge grant is the right grant program for your particular project. So to that end, help us understand and get excited about your vision and how your project advances your overall plan, whether that's for your Main Street, your downtown, your village center, whatever project that you're submitting, but really sort of imbue your responses with in the places that make sense, and you'll see it on the application. Just help us understand the vision. We do get excited about it. In the first pass, I'll just make a sort of anecdotal comment. When I've been reviewing these, the first pass, in addition to the inventory to make sure that all the material is there that needs to be there, is I'm looking at the project that's being proposed in order to understand how this will make the place more vibrant, more livable, more equitable. So start with your vision and the plan to help you achieve that vision. Once again, draft your responses and fine-tune the writing before you start filling out the application form. It's just the easiest thing to do, because once you have that honed down to character limits and you're saying what you want to say, you can copy and paste it from a Word document straight into the application form. Articulate your project budget and the capital stack very clearly. When we get to our diligence phase, once we've identified those proposals, those grant proposals that are the strongest, we on the review team begin to dig into the capital stack in great detail. So it behooves you to make sure that you're doing everything you can to get that clearly articulated up front. There are some requirements for state funding. Once again, as Allison said, this is taxpayer money. So the use of taxpayer money and making sure that we're allocating responsibly. We have an affordable housing requirement, prevailing wage requirements. Please ensure that your application complies with both. Those are in great detail on the notice of funding available. Projects we will not fund. And this I'm going to go there right now. We've talked about this based on some applications that we've gotten in the past. If you are looking to have a parking garage funded or a surface parking lot funded, this is not the program for you. There aren't too many programs that are going to fund that, but that's not enlivening your district. Yes, we completely understand that parking is important, but we're not using state money to fund a parking garage in your downtown. It's not happening. And just in general, projects that don't address creating density that and enlivening public space, no matter how large or how small your area is. We're talking about a mix of uses. We're talking about places that invite people. We're talking about vibrant, lively places. And so that's really the purpose of this grant. So some fun things right now, because this is a new and time-constricted program, we don't have a lot of impact stories yet, because a lot of these projects are just getting off the ground. But I'm going to share just a few slides here on projects, not all of them, but some projects that have been funded. So in round one, the Windsor Plaza redevelopment project, the town, in partnership with a private developer, will redevelop an existing strip mall to 70 apartment units and 5,800 square feet of new street-facing retail housed in 4 separate structures joined as one. So 20% of the residential units will be deed restricted workforce housing at 80% of area median income. And the property is located 500 feet from the Windsor train station. So the transit-oriented development piece of this. So the total project cost are, over $13.6 million. The Connecticut Communities Challenge grant that Windsor received was for $3.2 million. In Stamford, the Scrapworks initiative, this is very interesting. This was, I think, around one recipient. The city, in partnership with Scrapworks LLC, so private development, will retrofit underutilized properties on Pacific Street. This is south of the train station area towards the water, to create a year-round beer garden and food truck lot, an authentic German beer hall, a coffee shop, social co-working space, a pilot brewery and tasting room, and event space. The project will also create affordable retail opportunities by building the baseline infrastructure required for future prospective retail tenants, such as furniture, fixtures, equipment investments, rent credits, art, etc. So the total project cost is a little over $9.5 million, and they received a Communities Challenge grant in a little over $2.5 million. In Hartford, Arrowhead Cafe and Beyond. So the grant will be used by the city in partnership with the San Juan Center in the north side of Hartford, north downtown, and the Carabetta Development LLC to develop 43 mixed income apartments, a little over 70 300 square feet of ground floor retail space and a new public recreation space that will be activated by local small food related businesses, local resident owned food trucks, and artists. In the first phase, it'll be 18 housing units and 1,200 square feet of ground floor retail space. The first phase is the 43 mixed income and 7,300 square feet of retail space. The second phase will be 18 additional housing units and 1,200 additional square feet of ground floor retail space. So that project intends to tie together and enhance the pedestrian connections between North Crossing, which is the city's most affluent and high profile project recently, and the Clay Arsenal neighborhood, what's been a disenfranchised community, by creating vibrant retail corridor destination, by developing mixed income apartments for young professionals and local residents, and by providing a flexible plaza that serves as an outdoor living room where local culture is highlighted. So that project is a $17.4 million project, and Hartford received a CCC grant in the amount of $6.3 million. In New Britain, this was a round 2 award, so announced in December. It's the redevelopment of 102 West Main Street. The grant will be used by the city in partnership with Avon at 102 LLC, once again, a private developer, to support redevelopment of a historic mixed-use building, which will include, now on this slide, the current building is that top leftmost building. It's an opportunity waiting to happen, very definitely. The image in the middle is the architect's concept drawing of what it will look like eventually. So a great big change. So it will support 79 residential units, 20% of which will be affordable at various income levels, a street fronting restaurant suite, and a rooftop restaurant and bar. The building's existing historic brick envelope will be retrofitted to accommodate the new residential units. So 2 additional residential stories and a rooftop restaurant and bar will be superimposed on the existing structure. And this is all within a quarter-mile walk to the CT Fast Track station in downtown New Britain. Total project cost $17.5 million and a CCC grant of $4 million. And then in Torrington, up in the northwest corner, where the next Spotlight on Main Street event is happening on April 27th, by the way, marketplace and transit-oriented development at Railroad Square. This is an unusual project. The City of Torrington is partnered with a private developer, the local YMCA, and the Naugatuck Railroad to propose a multifaceted revitalization project within the Water Street Historic District, so above Main Street just a little bit. The plan includes, there's 4 parts of this plan: adaptive reuse of a former factory building to a large-scale marketplace and offices in a later phase. Part 2, promoting multimodal transportation and increased access to public transportation through the extension of a greenway, improved bus access, and repair to the historic train station platform. Number 3, new outdoor recreation facility to support increased programming for the YMCA, right there in the heart of downtown. And number 4, brownfield remediation and a resultant small parking area to serve the trailhead for the greenway and the marketplace development. So the total project cost there is $32.2 million, and Torrington received a $5.2 million grant for that. So that's just kind of a little walk through examples of what has been funded in the Connecticut Communities Challenge Grant Program in the previous 2 rounds. So that is what we have to offer in terms of big picture information. And I think maybe I should turn it back over for Q&A, because I'm sure we have a lot of them.
Thank you, Kim and Allison. This was really informative. I don't know, we may not have a ton of questions because this was a really, clear presentation. I know there's one question in the chat. If you could please repeat what I think you had mentioned earlier in the presentation, that any municipality is eligible to apply, correct? But that there's a certain percentage of applicants that from distressed communities that are going to be given a certain priority. Am I correct in that?
That's
Yeah,
exactly.
it's all 169 municipalities are eligible to apply for this grant program, but 50% of the available funding must go to distressed communities. That's a slightly nuanced interpretation of priority to distress, but it's just that 50% of the funding that we have available in each round must go to distressed communities.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if anyone in our audience has any further questions. Joe, I don't know if we can unmute you. But if not, Joe, you can put your question in the chat and I would be happy to pose it in your stead.
I'll jump in here while Joe is typing in his question. Hey, Joe. Allison talked earlier in the presentation about alignment with DECD best practices. You're applying for a state grant through the department. Some of those best practices, a comprehensive project plan, once again, help us understand your vision, but also really lay out, it will ask you for this in the application, the detail of the timeline, the operational plan for if it's vertical development, feasibility studies for the operation, for plan of construction, a realistic and comprehensive budget. Once again, can't underscore that enough. Limiting your soft costs. Allison did talk about that. DECD money should be any soft cost 5% or under. So really, as Alexandra has underscored, our commissioner has underscored, we want the state funding to go to shovel-ready construction related expenses. And then just that strong project readiness relates to shovel-ready, but make sure your permitting, your approvals are in place beforehand to the extent that it's possible. Design construction documents are well on their way, that nothing will be 100% obviously, but also other municipal approvals have been obtained or at least are well on their way.
And I'll just jump in to say, if you don't have all of that finalized, but can provide a plan for when it will be ready, or when you'll be applying, when the next deadline is, to show us that you're thinking about it, preparing, and that when you receive, when everything is ready, you can move forward and things won't be kind of delayed, caught up. You'll be ready to go.
There's another question in the chat. If you could remind us, what is the funding range again that people can apply for? Sure.
Projects, you should be requesting, so the project, the full project budget, this is not about the full project budget, it's about the amount of the grant, and the amount of the grant that you're requesting from DECD should be no less than $1 million and no greater than $10 million.
And you mentioned that a 25% match is required. So in terms of is there any, other than that 25%, the total budget, can the total budget be asking for a certain percentage of that to be covered by DECD? If that makes any sense. In other words, could it be 25% of the total ask you're matching? Like, do you have a limitation? In other words, like DECD will only pay for 50% or less of the total project budget? Or does it not matter as long as the match is in place?
That doesn't really matter. I mean, the total project budget obviously is a function of how large a project we're talking about. Just in those previous slides that I just did, that Torrington project has so many components to it. So it's over 32 million, and their grant, can't even remember it now, but it was over 6 or somewhere between 5 and 6-ish that they received in Communities Challenge. The important thing for the match is for distressed communities, you have to provide a 25% match. For non-distressed, you have to provide a 50% match. That can come in all those variety of sources. The FAQ really lays out, we have a lot of questions about match, understandably, and so it really lays out a lot of them. But you know, the big picture, it can come from private sources, very definitely, except debt doesn't count towards the match. And it can come from public sources, but not other state funding. So it's great if you have a project that also has brownfield funding as part of it. You know, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, but it can't count towards the match. However, federal funding can. We've had some communities that have had federal transportation money that have been part of the project that they're doing. And that federal funding does count towards the match. So yeah, the match piece we know can be very confusing. So once again, look through that FAQ document. And if anything isn't answered or you need clarification, our email address is right up there on the screen right now, ctcommunitieschallenge@ct.gov, and we will get back in touch with you with answers to those questions just as quickly as we can.
Another question. So if an applicant applies for a certain amount, do you typically, if you get awarded, are you typically awarded the full amount, or do you sometimes award less than what the applicant actually requested?
Yeah, Allison, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, the goal is to, you know, make the project happen and provide funding necessary to move the project forward. So we are looking, you know, we're looking for projects that meet our goals, and a grant request that takes prevailing wage into account, you know, has the budgeted request is, you know, everything is in order, the correct soft costs versus hard costs, all those things that we talked about. If it's in that range and the project is ready to go and everything is lined up, then we plan to award the full amount. We're not trying to provide partial awards here. It's, you know, yeah.
Yeah, it's not unheard of for us to provide less money, but that is a function of when we go through the diligence phase and we look really closely at the project budget and the capital stack, and we begin to dig in with the applicant asking very specific questions. Sometimes that does relate to an award that is less than was asked, but that's what, off the top of my head now, I'm thinking certainly in round 2, which I was completely involved in, that's with the full knowledge of the applicant, and we contact the applicant prior to the awards being announced to say, we can't fund the full amount that you asked for. Will you accept this amount? So it's not a surprise on the day of the announcement.
I was just going to say, you won't find out that you've received a Communities Challenge award, but not the full amount that you requested at the end of the process. There would be back and forth, as Kim said. And I think the goal is to, you know, provide funding required to get the projects done when they meet the goals that we've stated.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? I see, look at what a fantastic job Kim and Allison, well done. So we can at this point move on to the last part of our presentation. So Connecticut Main Street Center is certainly here as a resource to help our members with the Community Challenge Grant, either in the pre-application period of conceiving and ideating around Main Street projects that are appropriate for this grant opportunity, Certainly, we can help with the community engagement component, which is so important and should be well on its way prior to the application. Connecticut Main Street can help with the engagement strategies and tactics that will make sure that your downtown stakeholders have been informed and that they're a true partner in the development of the project and the application. And because the Community Challenge Grant focuses on mixed use, mixed income development, and the state of Connecticut is particularly committed to investing in residential development, Connecticut Main Street can help members with thinking through how the vertical development projects are complemented by vibrant, lively, and equitable public spaces. This is a great opportunity to bring our field services staff in to help think through some of these public space strategies. So the Connecticut Main Street Network extends throughout our state, and this network includes professionally managed downtowns and neighborhood districts, municipal planning and economic development departments, and 2 regional organizations representing the interests of many towns. We also have a professional affiliate membership program for industry professionals. This professional affiliate network provides our communities with access to specialized expertise relevant to downtown revitalization, preservation, economic and community development, real estate development, land use, transportation, marketing, and much more. So please visit our website, which is connecticutmainstreet.org, for our library of archived webinars. This one will be there as well. A directory of our professional affiliate network and our small business library that provides great business advice for your merchants. And as Kim mentioned, on April 27th, we hope that you will join us at our next Spotlight on Main event in Torrington, Connecticut, where we will tour their Main Street and learn about their new initiatives. You can go to our website, ctmainstreet.org/events, and click on the event to register. And once again, we want to thank all of our sponsors and program partners, as well as our wonderful guests from DECD. A note again to municipal officials that this webinar is approved for Certified Connecticut Municipal Official Credit with the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. When you exit the webinar, you will be prompted to complete an evaluation. Please take a moment and share your thoughts, as it helps us shape our programming, so it's most valuable to you. Thank you all again so much. It was such a pleasure, and we look forward to seeing a lot of successful Connecticut Communities Challenge Grant applications going your way, Kim and Allison.